This video was brought to you by NordVPN. It's fair to say that a lot has been happening in UK politics recently. The Prime Minister has introduced a new controversial immigration bill. The Telegraph has slowly been publishing messages from the lockdown era, demonstrating what they perceive to be mistakes the government was making. And Labour are in the middle of attempting to hire Arch-Partygate investigator Sue Gray as Starmer's chief of staff. Now, although we're still more than a year away from the next general election, it's worth considering what impact these three major events have had on the polls. Because with the Conservatives in power for 13 years, and apparently almost imploding in the middle of last year following the resignation of Boris Johnson, the real question is whether they've managed to recover, or whether they're still destined to be relegated to the opposition benches. So, it's worth starting this video by looking at the most recent voting intention tracker. YouGov is an organisation which produces these regularly, and on the 8th of March, they published their most recent update. In it, they show that Labour have sustained their lead. In fact, it's notable how stable these numbers appear to be. Labour have been in the high 40s ever since October, when the ill-fated Liz Truss premiership imploded. Similarly, the Conservatives have been hovering around the low 20s since October. To be more precise, Labour's current lead is 22 points, with the Conservatives on 25% and Labour on 47%. That's not the full picture though, because when we look at the best Prime Minister tracker, we see that people do think that Sunak would be a better Prime Minister than Truss. But it's still important to note that Starmer is still the favoured Prime Ministerial candidate. In fact, more people have thought that Starmer would be a favourable Prime Minister than the Tory equivalent since all the way back in late 2021. And who can even remember who was Prime Minister all the way back then? More seriously though, his current lead stands at about 6 points, which is pretty considerable. So, it seems that it would be fair to say that although things have got better for the Conservatives under Sunak, they're still not exactly good. They're still hugely behind in the polls, and it seems that the public still prefer Starmer and the Labour Party over Sunak and the Conservatives. So let's dive a little deeper and take a look at why this is. For starters, Sunak's popularity did actually improve following his new Windsor Framework Agreement. And that's perhaps unsurprising, because the British public have had to endure nearly endless debates about Brexit and how to address the situation in Northern Ireland. So it's maybe not surprising that they responded positively to the news that the Prime Minister may have finally put the issue to rest. In mid-February, about 27% of respondents had a favourable view of the Prime Minister, but this has increased to 34% in recent days. Similarly, those with an unfavourable view of him have fallen from 61% to 55%. It's worth noting, though, that although Sunak has improved his own favourability, at least partly on the back of this new Brexit progress, the number of people who think the government's handling of Brexit is going well is still very low. Only 23% of respondents on March 6th thought that the government was doing a good job with Brexit, and 67% thought they were not handling it well. In fact, the last time that this many people thought that the government was doing badly on the issue of Brexit was all the way back in early December 2019. Now, this perceived contradiction could be explained by the fact that the British public appear to associate this agreement more personally with Sunak, whereas the current perceived problems caused by Brexit, e.g. the vegetable shortage, are associated with the government's handling of Brexit at large, which could be an issue for the party which traded so hard on Brexit in the past. That being said, while the government's approach to Brexit is certainly important, it's not the most important issue right now. That's because the cost of living crisis is still ongoing, and it's severely hurting the Conservatives' credibility on the economy. Because traditionally, the Conservatives are the most trusted party on this issue. From August 2019, which is when this YouGov tracker started, all the way through to May 2022, the Conservatives were comfortably the most trusted party on the economy. And that's pretty much what you'd expect. But from the middle of September, this gap has narrowed hugely, and the Conservatives were a maximum of 5 points ahead of Labour on this issue. From then until the middle of September, though, this gap narrowed hugely, with the Conservatives a maximum of 5 points ahead of Labour on this issue, following Liz Truss's questionable economic decisions. From September onwards, though, the Tories fell behind Labour on this previously very safe Conservative topic. And the fact that Truss's disastrous mini-budget, her fall from power, and Sunak's elevation to the top job all happened in and around this time is unlikely to be a coincidence. And it's becoming increasingly clear that the public still associate this whole fiasco with the government's competence on the economy. Of course, in politics, the electorate don't always have the best long-term memory, though. Events that appear disastrous at the time can be forgotten. Margaret Thatcher, for example, presided over huge inflation and unemployment in her early years as Prime Minister. Following the Falklands War, though, her government's popularity improved, and she managed to increase her majority at the next election. So, if Sunak's government were able to turn the economy round and achieve something significant in another policy area, there's the chance that the public could just forget about the disastrous mid-2022 Tory economic drama. However, with the UK on the edge of a recession and energy prices still massive, this would be a very serious and pretty unlikely undertaking. Not only that, but the economy is only one policy area where the Conservatives are struggling. Law and order is another major issue for them. That's because despite attempts to appear as though they're tough on crime, such as the passage of the Public Order and the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Act, the public still appear to think that Labour are more competent on this issue. From the beginning of the tracker in August 2019 through to the end of March 2022, the Conservatives were ahead on this issue. Since then, though, the public have switched and appear to trust Labour on this issue more, albeit only by a couple of points. Now, perhaps this is because the public don't really believe that the aforementioned legislation actually improved the situation regarding law and order. Bear in mind, in this same time period, trust in the Metropolitan Police has fallen off a cliff after their handling of a number of high-profile cases, not least the murder of Sarah Everard. Additionally, this could demonstrate that the public either disagree on the government's need to stop the boats, or that they do agree, but they don't think that the government's actually succeeding with it. Irrespective of the reason, though, the fact they're so behind on law and order, the economy, Brexit, their leadership candidates, and voting intention doesn't bode all that well. And this is probably why the public believe that the most likely outcome at the next election will be a small Labour majority, followed by a large Labour majority. Then the public believe the third most likely option is a hung parliament, which would result in a Labour-led government. Now, obviously, this whole video is predicated on the idea that the British public's opinion will hold as is to the next election. And to be clear, that isn't necessarily true. And with the election more than a year away, it's hard to predict exactly what will happen between now and then. However, with polling really beginning to stagnate for the Tories, and not even their new leader improving things, it might be a time for them to begin worrying. Now, I don't want to worry you too, but a couple of years ago, I was the victim of identity theft. And I only found out when a letter from the court came through my door saying that I owed a bunch of money to a broadband company for an address I'd never even lived at. After a bunch of legal back and forth, I was forced to pay the money that I allegedly owed just to try and make the problem go away. But from then on, I was determined to make sure that I wasn't caught out again. And as such, I took a number of steps, including signing up for NordVPN. Now, you surely already know that NordVPN is the world's fastest virtual private network. But you might not know that they have a whole suite of threat protection features too. In fact, NordVPN's threat protection shields you from all kinds of dangerous things online, blocking malware, trackers, and malicious ads to help prevent you from falling victim to any of these scams or phishing attacks. Not only that, they also have a dark web monitoring service. So even if your data were to fall into the wrong hands, they'd scour the dark web to notify you when someone shares, leaks, or sells your details. Hopefully meaning that you'd find out what was going on before a court order lands on your doorstep. Now, ultimately, this isn't a fun thing to think about, but trust me, it's a whole lot less fun when it becomes a reality. Also, it's not just other people that this happens to. I hope you'll agree that I'm a reasonably smart person, and I did a computer science degree, and I still got. So, click the link in the description or go to nordvpn.com/TLDR to get a huge discount on their 2-year plan. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose. So, thanks for your support, and make sure you click the link in the description.